Soul Frame presents.
The silence in this house is a physical thing. It has weight. It settles in the corners and lies heavy on the old pine floors. 2 years since Sarah died, and the silence is still the loudest thing I own. I'm 45, an ex-firefighter with a bad knee and a ghost for a housemate. Out here in Three Creeks, Alberta, the prairie stretches on forever in every direction. And some days, this house feels like the last outpost of a forgotten world. My life is a routine carved from emptiness. Wake, coffee, stare out at the vast, unforgiving sky. Chop wood, fix what's broken, stare some more. In the evenings, it's whiskey and memories, a dangerous cocktail. The only thing that ever breaks the quiet is the landline. It's an ancient thing, a rotary phone that came with the house. I kept it because Sarah loved the sound of it, a shrill, insistent ring that cut through the prairie wind. Now it mostly just collects dust. Until the calls started. The first time, it was a Tuesday. The ring tore through the stillness, and I almost didn't answer. "Leo?" a woman's voice asked. It was a voice like honey and smoke, low and melodic. You've got the wrong number," I said, my own voice rusty from disuse. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, and the apology was so genuine, so warm that it caught me off guard. Then she hung up. A week later, it rang again, same time, just after dusk. "Leo, it's me," the honey and smoke voice said, a little breathless this time. "You won't believe the day I've had." I should have hung up. I should have told her she had the wrong number again, but I didn't. I just stood there, receiver pressed to my ear, and listened. She spoke for 5 minutes, a rambling, beautiful monologue about a demanding client, a lost dog she'd helped find, and the way the sunset looked over the Rockies. She didn't seem to need a response. She just needed an ear. When she was done, she sighed. "Talk to you tomorrow, my love." And the line went dead. It became our ritual, my secret. Every evening, she would call for Leo, and I would listen. I learned her name was Clara. I learned that she was a painter, that she loved the smell of rain on dry asphalt, and that she had a laugh that could make the ghosts in my house feel a little less lonely. I never spoke. I was a silent confessor, a phantom listener. And God, I was starting to need it. Her voice was a spark in the endless gray of my existence. It was an intimacy I hadn't realized I was starving for. A connection without the risk of being seen, of having my own brokenness exposed. I started looking forward to the ring of that old phone, the sound that once heralded only silence, now promising her voice. The first crack in my strange, perfect fantasy appeared a month in. She was telling a story about her childhood, about stealing apples from a neighbor's tree. She laughed, a sudden bright peal of sound, and it was like a key turning in a lock deep inside me. My breath hitched. My hand tightened on the receiver. It was Sarah's laugh. Not similar, not reminiscent. It was the exact same breathless, cascading sound that I hadn't heard in 2 years. The same laugh that used to fill this empty house. I hung up, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a coincidence. Grief was playing tricks on me, twisting a stranger's voice into a familiar echo. It had to be. But the next night, she called, and I answered. I couldn't stop myself. "Leo," she began, her voice softer tonight. "I was thinking about that little cabin we always talked about, the one by the lake." A cold dread washed over me. Sarah and I had that exact dream, a small A-frame cabin by Lake Minnewanka. We had drawings drawn up, pages torn from magazines, taped to the fridge. It was our dream. How could this stranger know about it? The tension was no longer subtle. It was a wire pulled taut in my chest. Who was this woman? Was this some cruel, elaborate prank? I started listening differently, not for the melody of her voice, but for clues. I strained to hear background noises, anything that might give her away. A dog barking, a distant train, nothing. Just her and the quiet space she was calling from. Her voice, once a comfort, was becoming a source of exquisite torment. Every turn of phrase, every soft sigh was a needlepoint of memory, stitching Sarah's ghost more tightly to my waking world. The sensual, imagined intimacy I'd felt was curdling into a knot of mystery and fear. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught between the living voice on the phone and the dead one in my head. The breaking point came on a Thursday. It was the anniversary of the accident. The ice on the Trans-Canada, the flashing lights, the silence in the car when I finally reached her. I was drinking more than usual, letting the whiskey blur the edges of the day. The phone rang and I snatched it up, desperate for the distraction. "Leo," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "I miss you. It's nights like these, when the wind howls, that I miss you the most. My heart's a lopsided moon tonight." The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. My heart's a lopsided moon tonight.
Sarah's words. It was a silly, poetic line she'd made up years ago to describe a specific kind of melancholy. She'd written it in letters, whispered it to me in the dark. It was ours. There was no one else on earth who knew that phrase. The fantasy shattered. The mystery was no longer something to be savored. It was a wound that needed to be cleaned. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't my grief. This was real. For the first time, I spoke. "Who is this?" My voice was a raw, broken thing. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Silence. Then a click. She was gone. She didn't call the next day, or the day after. The silence that rushed back in was heavier, more absolute than ever before. It was the silence of an answer I didn't have. My training kicked in. A firefighter learns to read a scene, to find the source of the smoke. I had one clue, the number. I'd scribbled it down from the caller ID weeks ago. I knew it was a local exchange here in the county, but that wasn't enough. I needed more. I sat in the quiet, replaying every call in my memory, searching for a sound, any sound beyond her voice. And then I found it, faint in the background of a call from 2 weeks prior. A rhythmic clang, 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 clang. It was the sound of the old CN train crossing the trestle bridge over the Bow River just east of town. I knew that sound. I knew the delay between the clangs. It meant she had to be within a few blocks of that bridge. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all I had. The next afternoon, I drove into that part of town, a sleepy neighborhood of wartime bungalows. I parked my truck and just walked. I didn't know what I was looking for. A woman's face, a name on a mailbox. I was about to give up when I saw him. An old man sitting on the porch of a small blue house. He was frail, wrapped in a thick cardigan despite the mild air. And in his lap, he was fiddling with something. A small, handheld tape recorder. My blood ran cold. I walked up the path, my bad knee screaming in protest. The old man looked up, his eyes watery and clouded with age. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice a frail whisper. I think you know my wife," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "Sarah." His face crumpled. It was a slow, painful collapse of features, the geography of a grief as vast as my own. He knew. "You're Liam," he said. It wasn't a question. He gestured to the chair beside him. "I'm Arthur, her father." I knew Sarah's father had moved away years ago after her mother passed. I'd never met him. He saw the question in my eyes. I moved back after she was gone. Had to be close. I got her old number reassigned to me. Thought it would feel, I don't know, closer. My mind was spinning, trying to connect the pieces. The calls. Clara. Arthur looked down at the tape recorder in his hands, his thumb stroking the plastic casing. "Not Clara," he said, his voice cracking. "Sarah." He pressed play, and out of the tiny speaker came the honey and smoked voice. "My Sarah." It was a message from an old digital voice recorder she used to use for her work. Notes to herself, story ideas, rambling thoughts, things she never intended for anyone else to hear. The twist wasn't external. It wasn't some stranger who sounded like my wife. The twist was a shared, secret madness. Her nickname for me was Leo, from her star sign. When the loneliness gets too bad, I call my own number, the number that used to be hers, and I play her recordings into the phone, just to hear her voice in the house again. I thought the line was dead. I never thought anyone would be on the other end. We sat there in the fading light, two widowers, strangers bound by the same ghost. He wasn't calling a stranger by mistake. He was calling his daughter, and I, in my own desperate loneliness, had answered. I hadn't been falling for a stranger named Clara. I had been falling for echoes of my own wife, curated by her grieving father. The intimacy was real, but it was with a memory. The mystery was just the shape of two men's intersecting sorrow. There was nothing left to say. I didn't feel anger or betrayal, just a profound, bone-deep sadness, a recognition. I saw my own desperate secret rituals reflected in this old man's trembling hands. I thanked him, stood up, and walked back to my truck. When I got home, the house was silent, as always, but the silence felt different. It no longer felt like an oppressive weight. The ghost had been named. The echoes had been given a source. I walked over to the old rotary phone. For a long time, I just stared at this conduit to a shared fantasy. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I reached behind the table and unplugged the cord from the wall. The connection went dead. The silence that followed was my own, and for the first time in 2 years, it felt like a beginning.